On January 31st, a fighter with no fear.
Public enemy number one, it's Nick Diaz.
Meets a legend with no limits.
The greatest fighter on the planet Earth, Anderson Silva.
When that door shuts, all hell is gonna break loose.
Oh! Unbelievable! The Spider is back! Oh! Nick Diaz! Wow. Without a doubt. That's a scary man. Anderson Silva. Nick Diaz. This is the fight.
I can't wait for this fight.
Welcome to another edition of Bookie Beatdown on the Fantasy Sports Network. I'm Paul Shaughnessy, and joining me as always, we have MMA Wiz and the sole proprietor of Ramsey Sokaju's trunks from his fight with, I believe it was Lyoto Machida?
His UFC debut. This is a very prized moment, not for him because he got ousted pretty quick, but big moment, UFC.
So you know Cody's legit. We're obviously here breaking down UFC 183. And in the main event, we've got Anderson Silva taking on Nick Diaz. Anderson Silva's a minus 470 favorite with comeback on Diaz, plus 375. Pretty heavy juice to pay for a guy that, last time we saw him, completely shattered his leg.
Last time we saw him, not only did he shatter his leg, but everybody was speaking he'll never fight again. He'll never be competitive again. That was the end of his career. Wow, what a sad way for the pound-for-pound king to end. And now he's coming back, and he's a big favorite. I see it stylistically. If you were to take, on paper, Nick Diaz and Anderson Silva, how could Nick Diaz ever beat Anderson Silva? He's not going to knock him out.
Exactly.
He's not going to submit him. He's far smaller than him. I see why people are complaining. But still, minus 400 seems a little bit rich.
Exactly. I think this line is basically representing prime Anderson Silva versus Nick Diaz coming off of 2 years of who knows what he's been doing.
Triathlons.
And yeah, that completely scares me away from betting on this fight. There's a lot of things. Is Anderson going to throw those kicks? Robin Black, Fight Network's analyst here, he was saying that, Anderson Silva's big thing is his left kick, obviously. And that's what, he was utilizing it in his fights with Chris Weidman. And that's kind of the trick to beat Nick Diaz as well, because he's really heavy on his front leg, and that's why he's able to put out so much output. Well, if he's not throwing that kick, how's he going to slow down the Stockton native when he's coming at him full force?
I have mixed feelings about that whole leg kick slowing down Diaz as well, because in the two fights that I've seen people try to implore that, the last one being obviously Carlos Condit, he landed a lot of leg kicks, but at any point, did it seem like Nick Diaz was hurt? Did it seem like he was slowing down? And the Evangelista Cyborg Santos, I never seen a guy eat so many heavy leg kicks as Nick Diaz did. And yet, once again, not slowed down, not fazed by it. You can hit him, sure, but if it's not altering his game plan, this is not necessarily going to work.
And one big thing that you have to worry about is, Nick Diaz is always going to have great cardio. You know that he's going to come in great shape. We've seen it in every single one of his fights. As the fight goes on, he basically remains the same output. In his fight against BJ Penn, he was able to batter him from start to finish of that, and he didn't really slow down his pace whatsoever. When Anderson's and Nick Diaz is working on triathlons and all that other stuff, so he's going to be in shape. When Anderson Silva is coming off of rehab and all of this other stuff, not fighting at that level, probably not sparring at the level that he had been accustomed to in his glory days, I'm worried that if Nick Diaz is able to survive the first couple rounds, the first onslaught, is Diaz going to be able to steal it in the last 3 rounds?
Well, two things that I factor in is, one is the weight cut. I mean, one, if you break your leg and you're sitting around all day, probably going to put some pounds on. And when we see Anderson Silva, they show him, at the gym or rehabbing the injury. He seems like a very large individual. And this is a guy that's fought as heavy as 205 pounds. So my concern is, if he cuts the weight to 186, 185 pounds for this fight, what if it completely zaps him? And then in the later rounds, we see Nick Diaz come alive a little bit. That's something. And certainly the other thing is, when you jump between those weight classes, and as you get older, you slow down. We've seen it with Roy Jones Jr. when he decided to move from super middleweight, eventually to cruiserweight, to light heavyweight. When he tried to come back down, he never regained the speed. Anderson Silva's a guy that's generally enjoyed speed advantage over his opponents. And now I'm not saying Nick Diaz is necessarily faster than him. But I'm saying, just like you're saying, in a 25-minute fight, if Anderson starts to slow down a little bit, Nick Diaz always kind of brings more steam per round. You're right. Maybe the speed advantage eventually catches up. Maybe the punch output eventually wears on him. And we don't know where Anderson Silva's punch resistance is at, because the last time we seen him fight in the Chris Weidman rematch, it was a single collar tie, short right hand from that clinch that completely dropped him. And that, to me, is a little bit worrisome. I don't think Diaz necessarily drops him, but it's something to keep the back of your mind. Is this good value on Anderson Silva? No. One thing that I would like to point out, though.
Too many questions for it to be good value.
But one thing that I would like to point out when I looked, and we generally go with Bodog. Bodog does not have prop bets out yet. But Anderson Silva to win by decision is a plus 265. And to me, that is real value because if Nick Diaz is going to lose, he's going to just get beat up for 5 rounds. He won't win rounds. He does not get put away. How does he get put away?
I think Nick Diaz is like 7-1. 7-1 by decision.
If he's going to win, it's also probably going to be a decision. Although that one's a little harder to cut.
The problem
is,
right? is exactly as you were alluding to it earlier. Is Anderson Silva's chin? Is it gone? He had a really good chin early in his career, but at this point, after that, the Weidman left hook, that wasn't anything too special. It was a good left hook, hit him right on the button. Out.
He rushed back into the rematch as well. You should take 12 months off between getting KO'd. And in his case, everyone was like, oh, it was a fluke. You had your hands down. You need to get the rematch. I don't think he necessarily wanted the rematch. Post-fight, he said, Chris is the champion now. I've had my time. But his management says, well, you were clowning around. And all the fans are saying, for the most part, oh, Anderson beat himself. They rushed him back into this. I don't think he fully healed. And I think that's why he was dropped in the second fight. Now, maybe this long layoff between fighting Nick Diaz is healed him back up, or maybe he's never going to be the same. We don't know yet, and that's why, as you keep alluding to, a lot of question marks entering this fight.
A lot of question marks indeed. We both are saying stay away from Anderson Silva here. Possibly a little bit of...
I like the prop line. To be honest, I do like the
prop line for Anderson Silva by decision. I don't mind that bet. And I don't actually hate a little flyer on Nick Diaz. Plus,
why not?
By fight time, this could get up to like plus 450, plus 500. Right now, it's plus 375. And, if we look at last week's card, so many of these fights, as you get closer, these odds are keep climbing and climbing. So, yeah, both of us kind of staying away from Silva. But this is such a tricky fight with all the questions that we're asking. We'll move on to the welterweight division where we've got maybe an equally tricky fight to break down. Pretty much a straight pick-em between Kelvin Gastelum and Tyron, the chosen one, Woodley. Kelvin Gastelum minus 120. Tyron Woodley can be had for dead even, plus 100. Who do you like here?
He's been fluctuating big, and I've been saying since the get-go, I like Tyron Woodley in this. Number of reasons. I just don't think Kelvin Gastelum is quite ready for this step up in competition. I get that he beat Jake Ellenberger. Kudos to him.
Let me stop you
Jake Ellenberger beats himself.
Let me stop you right there. Every single fight, I feel as though we have the same conversation about Kelvin Gastelum.
Fair.
When are people going to give this guy his fair credence? It's like Uriah Hall. It's just like, oh my God. Kelvin Gastelum was the last pick in the house. Uriah Hall was the first pick in the house.
He's just knocking everybody out.
Exactly. What happened? He seems to just, for a 22-year-old kid, he seems to have really good fight IQ. He's smart when he's in there. He utilizes his game plan. He sticks to his game plan. And nothing but success so far for the undefeated fighter.
Well, my question is, right after he beats Uriah Hall, he ends up fighting Brian Melanson, who, yes, he quickly takes out. Mm-hmm. And he had the fight against Rick Story was very close. He ended up winning a split decision, and it was a fight that really tested his grit. But then after that, when he missed weight against Nico Musoke, that was the first question mark that I had for him. He weighs in at 173. He didn't have Dolce with him. He didn't perform exceptionally well. I thought he lost the first round to Nico Musoke. That's worrisome. Now in his last fight against Jake Ellenberger, he wins in that first round. He had trouble in that first round. But if he didn't win in that first round, would he have been able to keep up that pace for rounds 2 and 3? I know he's a young kid. I know he's 23. But he's a bit of a big guy, and he doesn't cut the weight particularly well. Tyron Woodley's a guy that I know that can drag you into deep waters. I know that. And then on top of all that, we had the same conversation virtually with Miles Jury when he fought Donald Cerrone. You were on Miles Jury. You liked him.
I like the prospects.
The one thing that I pointed out of it was that when you're an undefeated young fighter, you're going to run into a roadblock eventually. It's going to happen. In his case, Donald Cerrone was that roadblock. Is
Tyron Woodley that roadblock?
He's that roadblock. He's that roadblock.
Tyron Woodley so many times
So
many times in his career, what have we seen? Is when somebody bullies him and they're the one, forcing the action, making him back up, that's when he's been struggling. It happened with Rory McDonald.
That's what happens when people fight Rory. They get in there and they think to themselves, nah, this is not for me, man.
He struggled in that style with Jake Shields as well. Okay. Jake Shields was able to back him up. As if Tyron Woodley is backed up and has his back to the fence, he is half the fighter. When he's moving forward explosively, knocking out guys like Josh Koscheck, completely different fighter as well.
If Tyron Woodley fights the same fight Ellenberger was on his way to doing, Ellenberger landing good punches. He made a stupid mistake that led him to getting taken down. Once he got taken down, he's on all fours. He puts his head up. as if just choke me already. You know, I don't understand.
Looks up as if
but
he's
Tyron
got,
Woodley's not going to do
as
that.
if he's got the Gastelum by first round submission prop. Or
Yeah,
something,
exactly. He bet the prop, or somebody was like, "Hey, I need you." But anyways, all jokes aside, he made that mental mistake. That's what blew it for him. I don't see Tyron Woodley doing that.
The speed that Gastelum was able to grab that back, though, was pretty impressive. And I know you're a bit of a Gastelum hater, but you got to give credit where credit's due.
Credit where credit's due. But, and I know Tyron Woodley doesn't exactly fight those type of fighters on a regular basis, but how often have you seen Tyron Woodley on his back being dominated
It doesn't
happen. I would assume
he does well against counter punchers. He does not do well against guys that pressure him. And I think Kelvin Gastelum is the type of person who's going to mad dog him, keep moving forward, and these two guys are going to clash. It's going to be one hell of a show.
Okay, well then one small little tidbit to throw out there is that recently in the week, John Pollock contacted Tyron Woodley just to basically talk about, pre-UFC 183 stuff. And he had mentioned to him, how's the training camp going at American Top Team? And Tyron said, I haven't spent the training camp at American Top Team.
Ooh, that would make me nervous.
I've spent the entire camp at Duke Rufus's camp. Yeah. No, it was Duke Rufus's camp.
Yeah.
And out in Milwaukee.
I saw pictures, yeah.
And to me that makes a big difference. One of two things, really. One,
well, he already had the drama with Lombard there, so maybe he's just trying to get away from that whole situation.
It's possible, but getting out of a new camp, new fresh feel, and we know that Duke Rufus's camp out in Milwaukee is more of a striking gym. So if he's working on his striking, he's got his wrestling in his back pocket, and then, to me, the end-all, be-all, the ace of spades in his sleeve, that with Ben Askren being there, helping out, what better welterweight could you possibly ask to work with? If your wrestling's on par, your striking's on par, you've put on a good camp, this is his fight to win. I love the line as well. The line's near even, if not having Gastelum as the favorite. I really like that. So I'm all in on the chosen one. He's my chosen one.
I think it's kind of funny that you're saying that because he's changed camps for a fight.
Change of scenery is good.
That's an advantage. That doesn't happen very often.
But it's a good camp. He's changing from a camp to a good camp.
I suppose. So Cody's on Woodley. I'm on Gastelum. Keep it locked here on the Fantasy Sports Network as we break down the rest of the fights from the main card when Bookie Beatdown returns. Welcome back to Bookie Beatdown on the Fantasy Sports Network. Paul Chauncey joined by Cody Safdie. We move on to the lightweight division where we've got my pick for fight of the night when Al Iaquinta takes on Joe Lauzon. Al Iaquinta's a minus 190 favorite with the comeback on Lauzon plus 165. This is a really tough one to call. Al Iaquinta's looked great, and his fight against Ross Pearson was about as good as you could possibly look against a really good striker. The one thing that worries me here is where have we seen Iaquinta struggle?
When he went into the danger zone.
When he went into the danger zone or when he got subbed by Michael Chiesa as well.
Fact, 2 times.
And we know Joe Lauzon he'll jump at your ankle. He'll do anything he'll jump and try to attack and get submissions that most people wouldn't put themselves in that type of danger. Joe Lauzon's all about putting himself in danger, and I feel as though my money may be in danger laying it on Iaquinta. I do like the New York native to get it done, but I'm not too confident, and I don't even know if I like laying 2-1 on that either. What about you?
When the line first dropped, I was all over Al Iaquinta, and I'm thinking in my head, yeah, you look great against Ross Pearson. We know that training out of Serra Longo, his jiu-jitsu's getting better, his wrestling's getting better, his striking's getting better. One of those guys that you would assume is just going to benefit from being in a gym with good guys. But now, yeah, you're absolutely right. Submission defense is kind of his issue. And you mentioned 2 guys that subbed him. Before he even made it onto The Ultimate Fighter, his last pre-UFC fight, I believe, was a loss to a fellow named Pat Otterwood, who was also in the UFC for a lot bit.
Yep.
Once again, a first-round armbar.
Kamala went down.
Kamala went down, not the first time.
Poor guy.
This is a case that you don't know 100% what you're going to get out of this. Joe Lauzon, yeah, he doesn't just play safe. He goes for those finishes. And if he goes specifically for a submission, there's no reason to believe he won't get it. The one thing, I'm not going to jump back on the Joe Lauzon bandwagon. A part of me really wants to. A part of me can visualize the fight happening, and they see Joe Lauzon choking him out. But that being said, I believe that training with Matt Serra and those guys has made him a better defensive grappler, and I feel that Joe Lauzon gives so many openings when he's fighting that a crisp counter puncher and a good volume puncher like Iaquinta take advantage of that.
The problem is if this fight hits the ground at any point, Al Iaquinta is going to be in serious danger.
Yes,
and we know this.
Yes and no. I agree with you. If the fight hits the ground, he's certainly at a disadvantage. But Joe Lauzon...
On the feet, I think we've seen enough, especially in that Pearson fight, that he can pick his shots, he can move. And
even the Rodrigo Dam fight.
Improved.
Rodrigo Dam, if anything, very durable. Al Iaquinta systematically broke him down, and in the third round just completely pounded him out and gets the TKO victory. So Al Iaquinta has that ability. But once again, with Joe Lauzon, my thing with Joe Lauzon here is if the fight hits the ground, you would assume advantage Lauzon for sure. But he takes so many risks. He puts himself at a disadvantage. If he's on top of you and the submission isn't readily there, he'll flip to his back to try a better submission.
Yep.
And unfortunately, that a lot of the time leads to him getting swept or unfortunately allows somebody else to get up. In the fight with Jamie Varner, he does it tons of times where he puts himself at a bad position to try to make something happen and it doesn't work out for him. In his last fight against Michael Chiesa, their common opponent, I should say, Joe Lauzon was winning, and then he's losing. He really is. He's on his way to losing the fight. And when all of a sudden the referee says, hey, let me check out that cut real quick there, Mikey, looks at the cut and says, no, this fight's over. That saved Joe Lauzon. So on paper, the bookie's going to look at it, other people are going to look at it and say, Joe Lauzon, bit of a stretch. Michael Chiesa is a hell of a fighter, and he just beat him. It's not everything it's made out to be. And this is Al Iaquinta's a guy that doesn't cut.
He was definitely coming back in that fight.
He really was. He really was. And I think Iaquinta puts a similar game plan in. He was kicking the crap out of Mitch Clark before he got caught in that fight. So you learn from those experiences, and I'm going to put my faith in that he's learned enough experiences, he's learned enough lessons that he will pull through and get the win over Lauzon.
All right, so both of us are on Raging Al Iaquinta. We move on to the middleweight division where we've got Talis Ladies taking on Tim the Barbarian Boach. Talis Ladies, a minus 475 favorite with the comeback on Boach, plus 380. Tim Boach, since his fight against Yushin Okami, hasn't really won a round of fighting.
But he has
in
won
7 fights, and I think he's 3-4 in that stretch.
Yeah,
he literally hasn't even won a minute of fighting. He just comes back, and somehow miraculously, I guess his Lombard fight, controversial decision there, maybe didn't win that one, but some people had given him the nod. But for the most part, yeah, he's getting dominated, thwack, and I am not going to run to the bookie to lay anything on Talis Ladies for that reason, because we've seen it. Lightning has struck twice. We've seen the Yushin Okami. We saw in his last performance against Brad Tavares.
Killed me.
And Lightning obviously could strike 3 times here. So small action on Boach. I'd be very interested in a prop, Boach by KO or TKO at any point in the fight. But yeah, I'm staying 100% away from Talis Ladies plus 475. That's insanity.
It's absolutely crazy. I'm avoiding Boach altogether because even though the knockout might have some good value on it, Talis Ladies a guy that can really take a good shot.
You know, if you make that Boach play, you have to be ready to be like, oh my God, he's getting killed.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, he's getting killed. Oh my God. Yes.
You almost want him to get killed for the first 2 rounds.
So he's desperate in round 3.
So that someone slaps him in the face between rounds and says, Tim, you got to go out there and you got to get it, Tim.
Exactly.
I agree. This is basically the definition of a pass fight because I do like Talis Ladies here. He's been on a 7-fight win streak, I believe, 4 straight since he's been back in the UFC. Unfortunately, this is not exactly a great matchup for him. I mean, Tim Boach is a big dude. Tim Boach is a guy that could hold you against the fence. He could, maybe negate the takedowns, and he's got a lot of power. I mean, not necessarily a guy known for specifically his knockouts, but when he does win fights, he comes back and gets the knockout. And so Talis Ladies is a guy that I think he matches up just okay with Tim Boach. And if you're going to match up just okay with somebody, I want better value. The line here is crazy. Yep. I am not touching it. I've been owned by Tim Boach in the Tavares and Okami fight. Lesson learned. Not going to happen again. Pass.
Cody, flat out pass. I'm saying maybe have a little. If you're desperate late in the night,
just
a little something to.
You always get more desperate the longer the night goes. That's just the way the world works.
If you need to get back on track, Tim, there's a lot worse bets than Tim Boach.
You could be doing worse than going home with Tim Boach at the end of the night.
All right, let's move on to. I said earlier that Al Iaquinta versus Joe Lauzon could be the fight of the night, but Jordan Mean and Thiago Alves may have something to say about that. Pretty much close to a pick'em fight here as well. We've got Mean as a minus 140 favorite with the comeback on Alves plus 120. Who do you like here?
I'm actually going with Mean. Once again, this is another case of when the line first dropped, I like Alves. And when you watch more tape on both guys, then you kind of get a good idea. Alves is more from that old generation. He's one of those original guys. We haven't really seen him in a long time. And someone mentioned the other day, well, he looked pretty good against Seth Paczynski. I couldn't disagree more. I thought he looked awful against Seth Paczynski.
You know who looked good against Seth Paczynski? Brian Melanson. When he knocked him out in the first round. Like, that's how you look good against...
James Mutasari.
There's a lot of people who look good against Seth Paczynski. And looking good is not getting a decision against him.
And my issue with Thiago Alves is you watch the tape on him, obviously he's a striker. He likes to strike. That's always been his game plan. Big, heavy leg kick, good heavy punches, aggressive. But he's so short that when you watch his highlight reel, he either just connects with the punch or he's really got to commit to close off that distance. And when you look a lot of the replays, he doesn't hit the guys. He swings and he just misses. Jordan Means so tall and long that you need to seriously commit into getting on the inside of him. Otherwise, you are going to eat punches from the outside, a la Dan Miller, a la Mike Pyle, because he can cover distance very quick. When you move in, stepping elbow. Beautiful with the elbow.
Yep.
The way he matches up is tailor-made to beat a guy of Thiago Alves' style, where Thiago wants to close the distance, but Mean can pick him off from a distance. Pick him off, pick him off, pick him off. Use that reach. I see this one going all 3 rounds. I'm almost going to guarantee it goes all 3 rounds. I just don't see either guy stopping each other. But I actually see Mean coming out on the winning end of this, and the value's certainly there too.
Couldn't agree with you more. Minus 140, great price on Jordan Mean here. Stick around. When we come back, we're going to break down the prelims portions of UFC 183 when Bookie Beatdown returns. Welcome back to Bookie Beatdown for our UFC 183 special. Paul Shaughnessy here with Cody Saptic. We move on to the prelims portion of the card and into the women's bantamweight division in particular, where we have Sarah McMahon taking on Miesha Tate. Sarah McMahon's a minus 210 favorite with the comeback on Tate. Plus 175. Who you got?
Yeah, I know. 2 former title challengers squaring off on the undercard. Good times.
Neither one of them looked very good against Rousey, but that just more speaks about how good Rousey is.
Exactly. And Tate didn't look too bad, obviously.
In the second one.
In the second one. Of course. Breaking down this fight, great fight. When you look at a card, you're always gonna most of the time you want the favorite. The bookie put the favorite there for a reason. When you go down, you have to be able to look at which underdogs have some serious value. And Miesha Tate's an underdog here with some serious value.
Yeah, I think the line has gotten a little bit out of hand here.
It's currently getting more and more out of hand every time I see it.
Plus 200. I suppose there's fights that I've been that I think of when I think of Miesha Tate and what type of problem she's going to have in this fight. And I look at that Liz Carmouche fight. Liz Carmouche is actually a natural 125er. She's a lot smaller, but she was able to use that wrestling. She was able to hold Miesha Tate up against the fence. Miesha Tate kind of got a bit of a miracle decision win there.
Yeah, it was a miracle decision win. I agree.
I had money on Tate, and I fully thought that she had lost at the end of that fight. But Sarah McMahon is a way better wrestler than one Liz Carmouche. She's way bigger, way more powerful. If she's able to implement that game plan against Miesha Tate, I could see this being 30-27 across the board, very boring, and very similar to maybe the Lauren Murphy fight that we saw with Sarah McMahon in her last contest.
Well, that's my issue I'm going to take with Sarah McMahon now is the Lauren Murphy fight. When you mentioned Tate, yeah, she did get out-grappled by Liz Carmouche, and Sarah McMahon, infinitely better wrestler than one Liz Carmouche. But it's like when you compare Dan Henderson to other wrestlers in his division. He is, on paper, a much better wrestler than all of them. He really is. But it's the style of wrestling, right? A guy like Derek Brunson was able to take down a guy like Yoel Romero. How is that? It's just stylistical wrestling here. Now, when I look at Sarah McMahon, she likes to tie up a lot of the time.
Yeah.
She likes to get the collar tie. She likes to push you up. Against Lauren Murphy, I think she struggled for a lot of those takedowns. She got the takedown, but she really had to work for it. And then when she physically got on top, nothing. That's why one of those judges sitting ringside gave the fight to Lauren Murphy.
I've heard this.
Why else would you give it to her?
I've heard this argument a lot, though. It's not like Lauren Murphy's any slouch.
No, but Lauren Murphy
was an undefeated Invicta champion coming into that.
She was an undefeated Invicta champion, training out of Gracie Baja in Alaska, where Jared Cannonier, the guy that got blasted by Sean Jordan, was her boxing coach. That's a bit of an unknown. Miesha Tate is somebody who I've seriously seen improvements in her game every time she goes in there. Her hands just look much better. Her wrestling looks much better. And when Brian Caraway was specifically acting as her head coach, maybe there was a little bit of, a bit of an issue there. He's your boyfriend, he's your head coach, he's trying to yell at you and try to tell you to do a better job, but he's also trying to nurture you and tell you he loves you. It's a bad dynamic. Now going to Extreme Couture, having a better coaching staff in front of them, having a better game planner in front of them, I think this is Miesha Tate's fight to win. She's very lateral. If she can move laterally, keep the fight standing, Sarah McMahon, zero ability to punch. She has no striking. And I feel bad for her because when you're an accomplished wrestler, you eventually develop the other aspects of your game. This is a girl, accomplished wrestler, never really developed the rest of it. I'm sure she trains boxing, but she's not a good stand-up fighter. And against Miesha Tate, who can throw some good shots, I really like the dynamic here. I think Miesha Tate stops a takedown, or at least stops enough of them to win rounds. Probably guess this one squeaks it out 29-28. You want value, and this is a fight with some value on it. I'm not betting McMahon outright, no chance. I would not put Tate on all of my parlays, but she's going to be on some of them. You can guarantee that.
All right, Cody's on Tate. I'm on McMahon to get the job done. We move on. We've got Derek Brunson taking on Ed Herman. This fight was supposed to happen a few months back. Derek Brunson obviously came up sick on the day of the fight, so they're back in action. Derek Brunson, massive favorite at minus 550. Come back on Ed Herman, plus 425. I know, Derek Brunson looked good in his fight against your Romero. He was dominating the first 2 rounds and then, got finished in the 3rd round. Minus 550 is totally insanity at this point, though. Ed Herman is such a durable, old-school kind of guy. He used to train with,
Team Quest,
Randy Couture, Chael Sonnen, all of those guys. He's seen every single type of situation that you can possibly be in. And it seems like every single fight, Herman's an underdog. This time, a really big underdog. I'm not buying into that all that much. I could see Herman winning the fight here. He's obviously not nearly as athletic. All of the attributes, except for maybe heart and grit, are on Derek Brunson's side, but sometimes heart and grit wins. So plus 425, I don't think it's a bad look. It's not a sexy pick by any stretch of the imagination. It's never a sexy pick when you're picking Ed Herman, but I am not. This is one that I may, similar to Boach, I may put a little bit of small action on this.
You know what? You're not wrong by no means. When the line first dropped at minus 500, I bet Brunson big. Now that it's going to minus 550,
minus 600 in some spots.
Exactly, and that's my point. It's going to continue to get bigger and bigger. If Ed Herman, who goes by the nickname Short Fuse, at any time in his career needed to change his name, he would more than likely change it to Ed Parlay Buster Herman, because he's busted so many parlays for me, and that you don't know what you're going to get. So durable.
He was like a plus,
so gritty.
Plus 200 underdog against Rafael Natal.
That one really killed it for me, because what you get out of that fight is that Herman's a guy that stays with you every step of the way. And what we saw from Brunson's fight against Yoel Romero was by the 3rd round, he was literally running away because he knew, I won 2 rounds, I don't want to engage, I want to get out of here. And he ended up getting knocked out. It happens. I don't think it's going to play it the same way. I don't think he cruises 2 rounds and then tries to stay away. And I certainly think he probably learned his lesson after that Yoel Romero fight.
And
Yoel Ed Herman is a parlay buster, so you have to watch that.
Yoel Romero is a totally different beast as well than one Ed Herman.
Derek Brunson's a guy that if you look at his losses to guys like to Jacare Souza, and Yoel Romero, I mean, it's the upper echelon of the division. And when he fights other guys, as of late, he's been dominating. I know he spent some time training in South Carolina, but I believe he's back at Greg Jackson's now, and that's going to make a world of difference. Unfortunately, if you're jumping onto parlays now, or you're betting in straight bets right now, you've already missed the line. Because at minus 600, I don't want to be disappointed by Derek Brunson. Slap myself in the face and said, why would I put a bunch of money on Derek Brunson, a guy I don't really trust? Ed Herman, like I said, a guy that will ruin your night. Either avoid this fight altogether, or hey, for fun, why not put a little something on him, right?
Exactly. So essentially, you're saying maybe a little bit of you're already locked in. Actually,
I got Brunson. But anything beyond this is a pass because the minus 500 is not great. But it's like I did at last week's event. You got Gegard Mousasi for minus 500. You got Mirsad Bektic for minus 500. Parlay the 2 of them. Parlay them with somebody like Tyrone Woodley, who you might get dog status on. Get yourself even money and get out of there.
I'm saying get a little bit of action on Short Fuse here, but don't get too crazy. Don't go anywhere. We'll break down the rest of the televised prelims from UFC 183 when Bookie Beatdown returns. Welcome back to Bookie Beatdown on the Fantasy Sports Network. All right, we move on to the little guys, and this is a fight that has no business whatsoever being buried this far down on the card. I don't get it whatsoever. We got essentially a flyweight eliminator. When you have John Dodson on the shelf, Ian McCall, John Lineker, Demetrius Johnson doesn't have a next fight lined up. So this has got to be it. This is whoever wins this fight is probably going to be the main event of some card, and for whatever reason, it's the third fight down on the prelim.
You never really understand these. Ian McCall's a guy that has a draw against Demetrius Johnson, and Lineker's a guy that people have been petitioning to get a title shot for a long time now. So it all depends on how they get the win, but that's what we're here to discuss.
Odds here, we've got Ian McCall as the favorite at minus 230. With the comeback on John Lineker, plus 190. I liked McCall about a week ago.
when it was 180.
When he was minus 170, minus 180. Now that it's getting up towards minus 250, Lineker, we've seen it. The guy's good as long as he seems to be on the right path to getting his weight and all of that under control. He's got the greatest equalizer. He's got the power in his hands. He can knock out pretty much anybody in that division at any given time. McCall constantly, we always hear about injuries and this and that with the guy.
And partying.
He's had a lot.
And cocaine. But all that aside.
Exactly. Minus 230, probably a little bit too much to pay. I could see McCall totally, staying on the outside, avoiding getting hit, and scooping up a 3-round decision here. But if this line gets a little bit out of hand, I'm not going to be nearly as confident, and maybe some small action on Lineker would be in play. But as it stands right now, I'm going with McCall minus 230. You could totally get busted on this one. What's your take?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you and go John Lineker on this one. Like I said,
this one's not in Brazil,
No, I know. And like I mentioned before, when I look at a card, I'm looking at my dogs that have a good chance. You're never going to have a card where every single favorite wins. It's not going to happen.
Yep.
So you need to figure out what dogs are coming through. To me, Lineker has a great chance here. First of all, the line from Ian McCall at minus 230, I can't get behind that. But the biggest thing here is that it's coming down to, this is your classic grappler versus striker matchup.
Yep.
We know Ian McCall just wants to get the fight to the ground. We know John Lineker just wants to keep the fight standing. But in recent years, that's the biggest thing that's come for
Ian
people.
McCall, we've seen him on his feet in his fight against Brad Pickett. He was able to stay up on the feet.
Just for short little points of time before he can get the takedown. And he's kind of trying to do that Machida-esque style where I can run around. You're going to get frustrated.
Yep.
You're going to come towards me. I'm going to hit you with a quick little jab. I'm going to get out of there.
Okay.
The issue with that, his last fight against Brad Pickett, is one, Brad Pickett, never looked good as a flyweight. As far as I'm concerned, never looked good as a flyweight. Was too slow to handle with it, and that's really what happened against Ian McCall. Ian McCall's very fast. He was just a lot faster than him, and he got the wrestling game. John Lineker, training at American Top Team, I know he's working on his wrestling. And the fact that he's so short and so compact, you really need to get him on the ground or you're in trouble. And I realized that when he got exposed against Ali Bogatinov, it's because of the ground game. But Ian McCall is not Ali Bogatinov. He doesn't have that physical presence, and he's not short like that. He's going to rely on this double leg takedown to get him down. And if it doesn't work, he's in trouble. John Lineker, this is John Lineker's fight. I do honestly believe that. And I'll be betting hands of stone. I think he I don't want to say grinds out, but I think he wins 29-28 for sure. Maybe not for sure, but I think he gets the win anyways.
I would say if you're going to put any sort of money on Lineker, I would wait until the weigh-in again. We've seen him have so many problems with making...
Does he lose the fights when he misses the weight? It doesn't really seem like it's something that affects
but he hasn't fought a guy of this level. This is the highest level of competition he's ever fought.
Sure.
And if he ends up gassing at the end of the fight, which he didn't do, trust me, I know that he didn't do that in his last fight against... Turkish delay, what's his name again?
Alp Oskilic.
Alp Oskilic. He looked really good, and he actually picked up the finish in round 3. And as the fight went on, he got better and better. Actually, Alp came out.
So then let's talk
blazing.
about that then. Let's talk about that. That's a fight that he won, made weight. It's a fight that all 3 rounds he was good. He was competitive. He kept bringing it on. And he's stuffing takedowns by a good wrestler.
Yep.
Those are all things that I can take into this Ian McCall fight. Mm-hmm. The difference is Ian McCall is leaps and bounds faster than Alp. So that's obviously going to cause a bit of a concern, plus the footwork. But what I'm saying is John Lineker's a guy that knows, listen guys, if I touch you, you're going down. He knows that. So he needs to work on his wrestling. His coaches, they know that. They're working on his wrestling. And like I said, in the 10 years that MMA's been developed, takedown defense is the one thing that seems that everybody's kind of starting to pick up. Is that guys that have no wrestling backgrounds all of a sudden can keep the fight standing.
Yep.
If Lineker can keep the fight standing, this is his fight. And for dog status, I do like it.
Cody's on Lineker. I'm on the veteran McCall to get her done. We move on to the middleweight division where we've got Rafael Natal taking on Tom Watson. Both of these guys, surprisingly, coming off of wins coming into this
Very
fight.
surprising.
We've got Watson coming off of a win over Smiling Sam Alvey, and Rafael Natal coming off of a win over Chris Camozzi. The line on this one has Rafael Natal as a minus 175 favorite with a comeback on Tom Watson, plus 155. I'm going Watson here because I feel as though both of these guys are around the same level. In terms of athleticism, I would give the slight edge, of course, to Rafael Natal, but neither one of these guys, if we've learned anything from betting on mixed martial arts, are guys that should be trusted.
Very much so. Generally, I would just say if Rafael Natal is fighting somebody else, I'd pick the someone else. If Watson is fighting somebody else, I'd pick the someone else. These are two guys that have let me down infinite amount of times. They both don't seem to have that killer instinct. They both don't seem to go for it when it matters the most. And even in Tom Watson's fight against Sam Alvey, who I bet Sam Alvey, he's winning 2 rounds, and he has to hold on that third round because he's going to get finished.
It's true.
Rafael Natal's against Chris Camozzi, I'm just dumbfounded the whole time. Against Ed Herman, I'm watching this fight and thinking to myself, what's your game plan, man? You don't have a game plan. He trains at the Renzo Gracie gym in Brooklyn, but he is the striking coach over there. I mean, he doesn't have the guys pushing him, and that's always been a problem for him. Tom Watson's a guy that's trained at the highest gyms across the country. He's trained at TriStar. He's trained at Jackson's. He's trained at Rain MMA. He doesn't make any improvements. I don't know what he's getting out of this. So this is a fight that's either very much pass, because I cannot trust either guy. It's a pick'em. But like you said, if it's a pick 'em, why not take the dog? And the dog is Watson, so there probably is a little bit of value there.
All right, both of us are on Watson. When we come back, we're going to break down the Fight Pass prelims portion of the card, so keep it locked here on the Fantasy Sports Network. Welcome back to Bookie Beatdown on the Fantasy Sports Network. Paul Shaughnessy and Cody Saftik here with you. We move on to the Fight Pass prelims portion of the card. And off to the featherweight division we go, where we have Diego Brandao taking on Jimmy Hedis. Diego Brandao is the minus 170 favorite with the comeback on Jimmy Hedis, plus 150. I think you know where I'm going to be going here.
I think I have a good feeling.
So I'm going to let you lead this one off. Who do you have in this fight?
You know what? I know exactly what you're going to say. And when I first saw the line, I thought to myself, wow, this is some good value here. I mean, minus 170 for Diego Brandao. Sign me up. I'm all about that. Unfortunately, Diego Brandao's a front runner. He either blows you out early or he seems to just completely wilt away. And Jimmy Hedis, if anything, can take a hell of a shot. I mean, he has not impressed me in a very long, probably not impressed me since like the Nam fan fight, which is, looking back, that not very impressive.
That was when he was actually a legitimate prospect.
Exactly.
At that point
long time ago, long time. He has not made the improvements, but his judo brown belt, his bit of a ground game, that could help him as the fight goes longer. My issue here is he doesn't have the physicality to get Brandao down in the first couple rounds. If Brandao can just win the first couple rounds and not get submitted or knocked out in the third, then he'll win the fight. I'm going with Brandao, I really am. But if you're about to tell me that Jimmy Hedis is the worst guy in the UFC roster, I'm going to be inclined to disagree with that.
I'm not going to go with that. No, what happened with me is that Marcus, the Bama Beast, Brimage, took on Jimmy Hedis at UFC 152.
The moment Jimmy Hedis' prospect bubble popped.
Exactly. And I took him in the company pool. Marcus Brimage ended up coming into the office and
teasing
you. I mean, I got trolled basically, and I was partially bullied, which has garnered no resentment from me towards Marcus whatsoever throughout the rest of my life.
Dead to me.
Yeah, exactly. So I cannot, in good faith, ever put money on Jimmy Hedis ever again. And I think this line is kind of being suggested by the fact that Conor McGregor totally blew him out in no time. But that was a tough spot that Brandao got put in.
On short notice as well.
On short notice over in Dublin, when everybody in that arena wants to see you hit the canvas. It's tough to hold it all together, especially, and then you're fighting a guy of Conor McGregor's talent. So I think minus 170 is actually great value on Brandao here. Let's move on. We've got Ildemar Alcantara taking on Richardson Moreira. Ildemar Alcantara is a minus 175 favorite with the comeback on Moreira, plus 155. I like Ildemar here.
I do not like
Ildemar here because, you know what, he went down to 170. He learned his lesson. He gassed pretty hard in his last fight. And And then you got Moreira, who was on the Tough Brazil season. He actually competed at heavyweight in that. So both these guys are kind of figuring out the weight class that's best for them. If nothing else, Ildemar Alcantara has pretty good fight IQ when he's in there. He's not very athletic. He's not like his brother Yuri, who's quite athletic. They're basically like complete opposites. It's like Yuri it doesn't have a great fight IQ, but he's really, really athletic, and that's what keeps him around, the top 15 of his division. Ildemar, I'm not saying he's in the top 15 of 185,
no.
But he, for what he lacks in athleticism, he does kind of keep to a game plan, and I would like to see. I actually am pretty confident that he's going to get the job done here. Neither one of these guys to be trusted, maybe as they try to find their weight class, the weight class that works for them. But sign me up for Ildemar Alcantara at -175.
Once again, I'm going to have to disagree with this one. My issue with Alcantara, and yes, his brother Yuri's very good, but his brother Yuri's also on a bit of a downswing right now.
Yep.
And the fact is that they're both the head coaches.
What do you mean? He beat Russell Doan.
Did he?
No,
Did he? And this is Russell Doan we're talking about.
The Brazilian judges beat Russell Doan.
Of course. The issue is that they're both the head trainers at their Marajo gym. And so I don't like guys that basically train themselves. One thing I don't like. But my biggest issue here is you got a guy coming down from going up from 170. So he fought at 170, moderate success.
He was a 205er, dropped down to 170.
Made a
and
very
then it was
late
a little bit
notice replacement against
Yeah.
Wagner Prado.
Yeah.
Correct. Goes to middleweight, goes down to 170. Okay? Perfect. Now he's back at middleweight. So you got a guy that's been competing at 170, coming back to 185. Now, his opponent, you got a guy coming down from heavyweight. He weighed in 216 in the Tough finale, decides to go down to light heavyweight, never fought at light heavyweight, but goes down there, probably thinks to himself, pretty easy cut, coming out to 185. So you got a much larger guy against a smaller guy. That's already a bit of an issue. But here's the biggest problem that I have. Moreira's problem is his chin. He can't take a very great punch, right? And lucky for him, Ildemar's not a heavy power puncher. So the fight's generally probably going to take place on the ground. Whereas Moreira has been training a long time out of Team Nogueira. You know he's going to have the wrestling background. You know he's going to have the jiu-jitsu background. And being the bigger guy coming down, if the fight takes place on the ground, that helps out. Now, you must remember Ildemar Alcantara getting out-grappled by Igor Arroyo, which was by far the worst fight I've ever seen.
You must remember
the worst fight
You must
I've ever
remember
seen.
Richardson Moreira getting knocked out in 20 seconds.
Getting knocked out, and that's the thing, getting knocked out. If he had gotten submitted in 20 seconds, I'd be singing a different tune. The issue is, Ildemar is not going to knock him out. The fight will take place on the ground, and if you're getting out-grappled by Igor Arroyo, flat out-grappled, it ain't going to be good for you, my friend, and Ildemar's probably fighting for a job here, or at least coming near the fight for a job point of his career.
Cody's on Moreira, I'm on Alcantara, and finally we move on to the curtain jerker here. We've got Thiago Santos taking on Andy Enns. Thiago Santos is a -170 favorite with the comeback on Enns +150. I know I've heard murmurs around the office that you're really high on Thiago Santos. Now, I want to remind you of the time.
I know what you're going to say, but I want to hear it.
Before he fought Cesar Ferreira.
Yeah.
We, in a different studio, but same podcast, we talked about this little clip of B-roll of Thiago Santos throwing a kick or a punch. I forget what it was, but it was the worst technique we had ever seen in our lives. And we were all aboard with that. He ended up kicking. It wasn't Cesar Ferreira.
Ronnie
Marquez. He ends up kicking Ronnie Marquez, who obviously probably had a broken rib coming into that fight.
Must have. He missed weight too.
Something was off, and massive underdog comes through. That's besides the point. I want you to tell me why Thiago Santos is going to get it done against Andy Enns, though.
Well, you know me, I'm very much so. You don't necessarily have to bet on a guy as much as you're betting against a guy, and Andy Enns is just not any good. The thing with Thiago Santos is, as you mentioned, when we saw the clip of him on Tough Brazil, he looked atrociously bad. But he gets the win over Ronnie Marquez, and that was big. Sure, imagine it was a broken rib. It does not matter. He gets the win, that's good. But it was his fight against Uriah Hall. I don't care about the broken toe. The adrenaline cruised Uriah Hall through that. It was the fact that Thiago Santos never let up, that he never gave up on himself, that he was always coming
an injured fighter, and he lost all 3 rounds.
Yeah, against an injured fighter that still should have been able to KO him. His last 2 fights, he's been heavy underdog in both of those fights, and I thought he did good enough against Uriah Hall and obviously beat Ronnie Marquez. Now against Andy Enns, this guy that's also 0-2 in his UFC career, has not done anything. And the fact that he lost that fight against Marcelo Guimarães, I'll admit, very close fight. Andy probably did win the fight. but it was so bad. It just really outlines that some guys are just not cut out for this level. Andy Enz is only 23 years old. He should be on the regional scene learning more. And just to throw something in your face, he trains at Gracie Baja, Alaska.
You just hate Alaska.
Not a good gym, man, is all I'm saying.
Alaska.
All I'm saying is that at the UFC level...
Are you saying Jared Cannonier's striking isn't on the level of Thiago Santos?
All jokes aside, Gracie Baja, Alaska is a good gym. But when you get to the UFC, the pinnacle of the sport, you're expected to go to other gyms. You're supposed to go and branch out and learn new skills. I'm not saying Tata Fight Team, which is where Thiago Santos fights out, is the greatest gym. But what I am saying is that he's got a room full of guys that are pushing him every day. I see this fight going all 3 rounds. So not only will I bet Thiago Santos, but just bet this fight goes the distance. Because Andy Enz can take a hell of a punch, and I don't see him putting away Santos. So
this one screams pass to me. So Cody's on Santos. I'm saying, don't start the night with a losing bet. Because I don't know, this could go either way. Neither one of these guys is to be trusted. But don't worry, we do have some trusted picks coming up just around the corner. Cody and I will give you our picks of the week, so keep it locked here on the Fantasy Sports Network. Welcome back to Bookie Beatdown on the Fantasy Sports Network. Paul Shaughnessy here with Cody Saftik. All right, we're just about out of time, but before we go, we're going to give you our picks of the week. Now, there's a lot of big favorites on this. There's Talis Leides, there's Derek Brunson, there's Anderson Silva. We're not going to give you any of those guys because really, what type of value do you get from those type of bet offers when you have to lay 5 times your money to get any sort of investment? So yeah, without further ado, Cody, you got to start with your pick of the week.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, typically speaking, like you said, we don't go after the biggest favorites. So where am I going to get some good value and who I think is going to win? I'm going with the chosen one, Tyron Woodley.
Ooh, underdog status.
I've already explained my opinion in this podcast, is that I really like Tyron Woodley's wrestling. I like his grappling. I like his striking. I like his mentality. I like the gym. I like it all. I really do. I have no reason to believe that he's going to falter in this fight. God, I hope he doesn't falter in this fight. But Tyron Woodley, the chosen one. I know you disagree with that.
I do.
That is my pick of the week.
I do, and that's fine. You can, because I know you're going to disagree with my pick of the week.
Oh no, who is it?
Which is Mama Bear McMahon, Sarah McMahon. Sarah McMahon going to get it done. We saw it in Miesha Tate's fight against Liz Carmouche that she was able to be controlled on the ground, and she should have lost that fight. Now she's going up against a Olympic wrestler. And the being able to make it to that level, being an Olympian, for someone like Sarah McMahon, getting crushed by Ronda Rousey, that's going to turn a whole different gear on for her, I think. And she's going to come back much improved, much more aggressive.
But
and
let me ask you
Lauren
this.
Murphy, of course, like that didn't. But she hears all the the mutterings and all the stuff that goes around. I think she's going to come into this fight. This is a fight that she's going to wake up for, and she has a clear wrestling advantage over one Miesha Tate. So I know minus 210, a bit of a big favorite, but nothing too crazy. So yeah, Mama Bear McMahon, getting it done Saturday night.
All I gotta say,
hey, I didn't agree.
Sarah McMahon at the Olympics, silver medal. Sarah McMahon at the Pan Ams, silver medal. Sarah McMahon in the world title shot, second place. Always a bridesmaid, never a bride.
Well, luckily there's nothing actually really on the line in this fight, so she's gonna get it done. But that's all the time that we have for now. Hope you enjoyed the show. So for Cody Saftik, I'm Paul Shaughnessy saying goodbye and good luck.